All right, remember our medical analogy that we used in Animal Farm, right? What did our medical analogy have in it when we were using it to explain what was happening in the book Animal Farm? It had 3 parts. Does anybody remember those 3 parts? What's the first thing that happens when you go to a doctor?
Diagnosis.
That's right. That's right. What's the diagnosis? What do you think the diagnosis is?
So we find what kind of problems do I have?
Okay, so we're going to list the problems, right? Okay, so now we're looking at this from existentialism, right? Don't let the big words scare you, all right? So what we want to understand what this is, right? So now from reading this book and say maybe reading a couple of other existentialist novels and plays, I sort of come up with what I think the diagnosis is, right? In other words, it's sort of like Animal Farm, right? Old Major describes what makes Man and Farm sick, right? Well, this diagnosis is going to be kind of the same, right? Except instead of applying just to Animal Farm, it's going to apply to humanity as a whole, right? So one of the first themes that I see in existentialist literature is this idea of loss. Right? So, well, what do I mean by loss? I mean everything, right? So, you're going to lose your youth, right? Your health, your friends, your possessions, all of this is part of the experience of loss. Leo, do you need a piece of paper? So you can take some notes? So all of this is part of this experience of loss that everybody experiences. Right? Another thing that we're going to experience is solitude, right? In other words, being alone, you could say being in exile, or being alienated from others, right? These are all different ways of getting at this same experience, right? Being alone. So loss, being alone, right? Then another thing that is going to happen to all of us at some point is we're going to suffer bad luck, right? It's going to happen to all of us. We're all going to have the experience of bad luck. Bad luck is something you can't control and something you can't predict, right? Because if you could predict it, you would just not go out of the house that day, right? And you can't control it, right? You have no control over what it does to you. And then, if all of this wasn't bad enough, well, what's the inevitable end of all of us? We're going to live forever? That's right, we're going to die. All of these things are going to happen to all of us, right? It may not happen today, it may not happen tomorrow, it may not happen next week, but it sure is going to happen. All right, so that's the diagnosis part. So now what's the next part in the medical analogy? What's the next thing that we need to know if we're using this medical analogy to explain, to help us understand why things happen the way they do in a stranger?
Treatment.
Yeah, the treatment. So the existentialists want us to sort of look at this and go, wow, this is pretty harsh, right? Just like the conditions on Animal Farm, right? Where the majority were being exploited by the minority, right? And then as soon as the majority could no longer be exploited, they were simply discarded, right? Those conditions were pretty harsh. So there was a treatment, right? That was rebellion, right? So what's the treatment that the existentialists offer us to sort of combat or deal with all these difficulties of life? Well, it's living in the moment. Now, by saying living in the moment, I'm not saying that you don't make any plans for the future, right? But you don't live for the future. Why is that? Well, what's the only thing that we're really guaranteed? If you understand the world this way, right? What's the only guarantee that we have? What's the only certainty that we have? Is tomorrow a certainty?
Today.
You're cheating. Stop it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So the only certainty that we have is today, right? We have no certainty about tomorrow. Because, well, any one of these things could come along and take it away, right? Bad luck, death, loss, right? They could all take away some future that hasn't occurred yet. The only thing that we're certain of is the fact that we have today. So, we want to make the most of that today that we have. Right? It's the only guarantee that we have. Now, instead of viewing that as a bad thing, which it could be interpreted that way, what's a positive way to interpret it? Well, think about it this way. If you care about somebody, when's the best time to tell them that you care about them? Next week? Next month? Next year? That's right. Because you might not get a chance tomorrow. Right? So now think about how that would radically change your relationship to other people. Right? So instead of having a silly fight with your parents and thinking to yourself, oh, tomorrow I'll apologize. Or maybe tomorrow they'll apologize. Well, if you had the perspective that the only guarantee that you had was today, wouldn't that kind of change how you treated other people? Maybe in a positive way? Because there's no guarantee that that person is going to be here tomorrow. So maybe you'd be less inclined to mistreat other people, especially other people you cared about. Right? Okay, so now, let's say we follow this treatment, this therapy. What's going to be the state of health? So, in dealing with all the difficulties of life, right, that the only certainty, the only guarantee that we have is now. So we live in the moment, we enjoy the moment that we have. What state of health is that going to give us? Well, think about this. If you live in the moment and you enjoy now, are you sort of plagued about worries concerning the future?
Sorry, Nick.
All right. So if you live in the moment and you enjoy the moment, are you worried about the future? If you're enjoying a nice sunny day today, are you worried about a storm that might come tomorrow? Are you letting the storm that might come tomorrow ruin your enjoyment of today? No. All right? So, this gives you sort of one way of thinking about it is you're less burdened by worries about the future, right? And that would be one way of thinking about it. Another way that I'm going to sort of present the state of health to you is to mention this concept by Nietzsche called eternal return. Now, it's the idea that you have to live every day of your life over again, forever, right? So, Nietzsche's presentation of this idea, one presentation of this idea that he gives, sort of an evil genie comes to you, right, like a magical genie. And the magical genie says to you, could you live every day of your life over again forever? Well, there are two answers, either yes or no, right? How do you think Nietzsche wants you to respond to that question? Does Nietzsche want you to be able to live every day of your life over again? Or does he want you to say, no, I couldn't do that, because I made a lot of mistakes. I lived my life the wrong way. What kind of attitude does he want you to have about your life? That you made a mess of it, or that you did the best that you could, and you enjoyed it for what it was?
The best.
Yeah. That you made the best of what you could of your life. So much so that you're willing to live it over again every day, forever. Right? Now, so that makes you think to yourself, if I have to live every day of my life over again forever and ever and ever, well, if I can't answer that question in the affirmative, if I can't say yes to that idea, then I need to change my life. Right? I need to do something that is worth living over again and again and again forever.